And now is Ben Young with The Best Ideas Are Free, always on a Monday morning to kickstart some ideas for the week. How you doing, Ben?
Good morning.
Good morning to you. And today we're talking about poor economics and tall success.
Yeah, poor economics and tall success. Over the past few weeks, whilst I've been off air, I've been reading a few books. The latest one is called Poor Economics, A Radical Rethink on the Way to Fight Global Poverty. And this book kind of lays down the preface that the way that we try and assist and fend off poverty is not the right approach.
Yeah.
And the book kind of goes into detail about the hundreds of little decisions that someone needs to make to pull themselves out of poverty. And they talk about how the glaringly obvious things just really hold people back. And so that's what really struck me, is that it's all these little things. And early in the book they kind of talk about how nourishment and small investments can make a big difference in someone's earning potential. For example, in India they have high rates of anemia, as high as 56% in females, which of course means they can't work as long days, they can't look after themselves, they have a lot of health issues, and that flows through to everything, and then that impacts them for all of their lives. Whereas if they were able to make a bit of an investment of, say, $7 a year, they can increase their earning potential on average by $46. So like a little investment here, they get 7 times the return.
And in what kinds of things? What would
So in that example, that was fish protein. Fish oil protein.
Yeah.
As another example of how getting a 51-cent injection of iodine would help keep you healthy for the next 2 years.
Gosh, these are such cheap
So like really
solutions.
Small, minute amounts.
Yeah.
But that's what this book goes into. It talks about how, yes, there are obvious things when you're not poor, but when you are poor, it's hard to make those decisions. And it kind of talks about the ways that people and organisations have tried to educate masses of people to understand, to make these little decisions. For example, in Africa, in the past, before HIV and AIDS was such a massive problem, there was quite a ceremony when someone died in the family. And that ceremony would actually cost you about $800 to $1,200 US.
Right.
So in the past, when people lived longer and they didn't have this big problem of HIV AIDS, they could bear that burden. However, lifespans have shortened significantly.
Yeah.
So often families are actually starving because they follow this tradition. And so the government's tried to steer that away by putting a cap on how much you can spend on ceremonies with that in mind.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting. Another one is we often associate tall people with success. And
it's true. See, a lot of CEOs are quite tall, aren't they?
Well, there's hundreds of studies. Like people that are taller are more happy. One recently, people that are taller have a higher occurrence of cancer. So there are some downsides. People that are taller are better athletes. Women prefer them, more attractive, smarter. Apparently, another study said that each inch was worth $789 each per year.
Is it really?
But what this book does is it goes down, it breaks it down. Why are people taller? And it says if children are well nourished, that means as a result they'll be taller than their peers.
Yeah.
And if they're taller than their peers because they're well nourished, that means they spend more time at school, which means they spend more time doing a bit more sports and team activities and all the associated things that we have with success.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're undernourished, you don't reach your genetic potential, which means you're not as tall, basically.
Interesting. And so it kind of sounds also like it aligns with that Malcolm Gladwell
tipping point,
but also the outliers side of things, where if you if you were the oldest in your year at school, you
would do
had
much better
advantages. Yeah.
His argument in that book was that in sports teams, and he was looking at Canadian hockey teams, there should be two seasons in the year. There should be people born in the first 6 months and people born in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Because if you take a year of school kids, the person who is the oldest can be as much as 12 months older than the youngest person in the same team, just because of when their birthday is. And that year can actually make a significant difference. And they did an analysis of all the top players, and they're all born in the same 3 months.
Right.
And so it's the same kind of thing. Little changes when you're a kid can make big changes when you're an adult. So
if you were born in the first 3 months and you were tall, it's like a double whammy, isn't it?
Yeah, double whammy. Well, by definition, if you're born in the first 3 months of the year, you are going to be taller than your peers born in the last 3 months, because you've got 6 or 7 months on top.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite interesting. One of the other things they looked at is how you spend your money when you've got limited funds. And there are a couple of things. We will treat ourselves with nice food. Because we don't have a lot to spend, that means that we're probably buying low-quality sweet food, food that tastes good.
Or takeaways, yeah.
So that kind of stuff. Then the second group is we'll buy leisure items like TVs and cell phones because that helps avoid some boredom. And it's really interesting that of all these little decisions you can make, half a dozen actually make a significant difference on your outlook on life. If you could divert that funds away from spending on a TV to spending on, maybe improving the house, getting new blankets, improving your food, or spending a little bit more on education or health products, it would make a big difference. And that's what really struck me when I went to Peru. I visited a few local families, and they were living in little shacks, essentially. Not very warm, big fireplace to try and put a whole lot of warmth into the house. But everyone in the house had a cell phone. Not all of them had a TV, one had a TV. But those are like obvious choices that you could use to reinvest into your own life.
Yeah. Fascinating. And where did this research come
so
from?
I've got a few sources. If you look up this book, Poor Economics, A Radical Rethink of the Way to Rethink Global Poverty by Abhi Benares. But if you jump on my blog, I'll have a source up there.
bwagy.com is where your head's, and also on Twitter as well. We continue the conversation there. Thanks very much, Ben.
Cheers.